ahead and get started. Welcome everybody. Today is Tuesday, August 26th, and the time 2025, and the time is 4:15 p.m. We are convened as the Provo City School Board of Education, meeting at 280 West, 940 North in Provo, Utah. We'll begin with a roll call on Jennifer Partridge, Board President.
Gina Hales, Board Vice President.
Melanie Hall, Board Member.
Lisa Boyce, Board Member.
Meg Van Wagenen, Board Member.
Emily Harrison, Board Member.
Terry McCabe, Board Member.
Devin Daly, Business Administrator.
Wendy Dow, Superintendent.
Okay, thank you, and we want to welcome other district cabinet and guests who are here with us today. So, do we have a motion to start our study session?
I move that we start the study session.
A motion made by Board Member Hall. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Boyce. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we are now in our study session, and we are going to begin with our board member training, and today that is Lisa.
Great. So this topic is board leadership, and I started first by looking at our two policies, policy 1107 and I don't know if it was 115 or I thought it was 1108 that I looked at. Maybe that was right now. The second one, definitely, it was a good thing for me to look at and think, oh, we should probably look at this policy, because it talks about other leadership positions in a way that I wasn't clear that I understood. It's
Which policy?
I'm going to make sure I get the right number for you. 1108 actually was the first one that was linked. It's not linked now, but it talks about board internal operations, other officers, and that these officers take the constitutional oath of office. Anyway, I just wasn't clear on that, so I thought we would put that on for our policy at some point to take a look at, because I'm not sure what it means or how it's relevant, and since it's from 2013, I thought that might be good to look
Utah
over.
statute attached to it, maybe.
Yeah, that might be it. I did read through a couple of things, but basically, the way I really like the way that our district has leadership kind of rotating just through tradition between kind of east and west side, and it's not just a seniority issue, right? It's a decision that we make based on who has the bandwidth and who we feel is the most qualified to do it at the time. And that's how we select board leadership. It was interesting to read through the state guide of different ways of selecting, and I think it's great the way that we are doing this. In terms of planning and preparing for board meetings, which are, a big part of board leadership's role, it talked in the state's guide about setting an agenda, making sure that agenda is distributed in advance, collecting and coordinating the presentations and documentation to make sure that that's all in there in a timely way, and making sure we're all clear on meeting protocols, and reviewing legal and procedural requirements, and then I thought it was interesting, it said facilitate pre-meeting discussions. We don't usually have discussions unless they're in an open meeting, so I kind of thought, well, I'm grateful that we don't actually do that, because I think it's more transparent to have all of our discussions here, for the public to be a part of those discussions and to be able to give us feedback on those. But something it mentions is the importance of board leadership, encouraging participation and collaboration from every board member, and with our student board members, I think that's an important role to make sure that we're hearing from them on things, especially if there's something there where we know that they're going to have a voice that we need in that conversation, and then just kind of ensuring that board leadership stays kind of not neutral, like obviously you're going to have your position, but that you're not trying to kind of build a case for something or push an agenda, but rather to facilitate everyone's collaboration and participation as decisions get made, as policies get written, etc. And I really appreciate and want the public to know that the way that our agenda is set is we have a spreadsheet where board members can put items that we think we would like to see discussed in this meeting on that spreadsheet, Board leadership looks at that and talks with our superintendent, Devin, as they're setting an agenda. And also just per state code, anytime 3 or more board members request the same agenda item, then in the board leadership will make sure that that is discussed at the right time. And I think that's basically it. I really appreciate the leadership we've had while I've been on the board in really trying to follow these best practices.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. All right, perfect timing. We will now move on to our Tinsley High construction update.
Are you ready now, or do you want to wait for her?
Okay.
Yeah, we just need to get logged in with the screen.
Okay, that might take minutes, so let's, while we're
Okay,
doing that.
so we're gonna switch
everybody needs to get
items.
him on our Wi-Fi.
Okay.
Or, I'll just turn it on hotspot.
So let's go to the Wasatch Wall.
Okay, we're gonna go to item F instead, the Wasatch Wall update.
So we received the final report from Langen, and the report basically calls out the design of the building and the compaction and the can you help him get on the network? The compaction and the content of the soil. And so we will be meeting this week with Hogan, Langen, IGES, HADCO, and district, the 3 members of the board and district leadership to go through the solution that was recommended. The solution is not a lot different than what was recommended before, other than an extension of the blanket drain. That was recommended just a little bit further, just to make sure that we catch all of the areas that could be an issue, and then then the wall can go back up. So that's what we'll be discussing on Thursday, is that plan and a schedule going forward of what that will look like.
With that, because it also sounds like the report talks about compaction, the soil content, that seems more above and beyond what the initial plan was, just redesigning the actual wall. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, will that...
So the original design to fix the wall, the original design did not have the blanket drain.
Okay.
The original design to fix the wall had the blanket drain, but just at the corner curve. And the recommendation from Langen is to take it just a little bit further.
And that will help, that will also that will also address the compaction and the soil content issues?
Correct, because the blanket drain will help mitigate that issue that we have. So that should be a good solution, and so we'll get together with the designer of the wall, the builder of the wall, our contractor on Thursday afternoon, and make sure we are all in agreement, and that we also still have the piezometers and the inclinometers. The fact that I still remember those words, unbelievable. I think it's burned in my brain forever. To be able to do readings from the moisture readings, long term, will be helpful as well. So.
Can I just ask a quick question around how that's helpful? And I know it could notify you that there could be a problem, but then what? Just about ask that.
That's a very good question. We can ask
You're about to
Langen.
have a problem, and then you just watch it, or is
It's
that
kind of like an actionable step.
That's what I'm just wondering,
No, I'm
like,
just kidding.
is there a thing?
And it's a great question of what we would do if there was, and I think it's just we're making sure that there isn't buildup. And so we can ask him on Thursday in the meeting.
I think that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that may mean, is there some type of maintenance or, plan A, when this happens, then you need to do this, and what does that look long-term financially, right? If there's something we have to always potentially address, depending on what those readings say, right?
Correct. And so we'll have to ask them what that process looks like. If we know there's moisture building up, what do we do?
Right.
Yep.
And what's the cost?
Well, at that point, there is the option of drilling, so to drain. I mean, you wouldn't have to take down the wall to do that, but
Sure.
so I mean, there are things you could do without the wall failing. but we can ask,
Yes,
we
yeah.
can ask him on that on Thursday.
Yeah, I think I'm just thinking in the future, like what type of maintenance will that then mean for this wall going forward,
Yeah.
right? Like it's kind of a maintenance or like
Yep. And the
not
long
rebuilding
term,
it,
yep,
but-
the long term issues will be addressed in the meeting.
Will they address if there were any other water issues, did they inspect all the other
They
walls?
inspected so AGEC, we're still contacting to see if they'll be able to be there to give us the results on those other walls. At this point, that does not impact the putting up of the wall, so that could be a separate discussion if they're not available, or we'll look into it.
Okay, thank you. And I neglected to welcome our student board member, Rachel Ruth, is being here. Are we ready?
Please talk with
for-
your mouth full.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, we'll turn it over to our construction team here.
We're gonna try to connect the TV real fast. I'm gonna go to the front. Josh is gonna be the brains of the outfit in the back.
And this is Trent, everyone. Trent Hensman. He is our awesome construction manager. Pretty much the person who keeps me sane all the
Okay.
time.
I thought that was
Thank you for that. I don't know how good of a job I'm doing.
Everything else is you.
So-
Do you want that responsibility?
I'm not so sure.
He's volunteer.
Devin is gracious, and thank you for that. I need to acknowledge my right-hand man, number one guy in the back. This is Josh Burtonshaw. He's our project engineer. So he's the one that keeps me running and looking good, so I appreciate him. We're going to talk to Temp View High School for what's going on. Will you go to the next slide? Just a brief overview. We're going to talk about the basement, cafeteria, the exterior, outside of the structure. We're going to talk about the transition as we've gone back to school and the future phases that are coming online. This is kind of a longer report because we haven't met. And so I don't know at the end of this if you're going to want to have us come back monthly or for a quarterly report's probably more appropriate, whatever you'd like. And I want to leave that door open, so however you'd like to see us, that's how often we'll come. So in the basement, the process here is for pier installing. There's a lot of instability in the building. Of course you know that. We are trying to reinforce and stabilize the building by anchoring that to the mountain. Okay, that's called the piers. There are 206 or 11, I can't remember which. Piers that needed to be put in to the basement. That process is going in, cutting the existing slabs up and pull the slab out and then go ahead and dig the hole down. We're going to expose the footings in those existing structures, and then we go ahead and drill. This is actually the drill that's doing it. The blue part is the ram that actually screws the anchor into the ground and drives the pier down. And they end up bolting onto the footings and foundations like this you see here. And then of course, we fill everything back up and reconcrete the floor. So you really can't hardly tell that we've been there. And that repeats 211 times downstairs.
How many do you do in a day? Half a
It
load?
varies because of complication.
Okay.
One of the first things that we had to do downstairs is ascertain how do we get there. There's lots of safety issues. You're in a confined space. We have equipment. We've got to evacuate the air. All that kind of stuff's factored in. So our day-to-day production has varied quite a little bit. If you wanted to go to the next page, to give you an idea of how things have turned out. In our original schedule, we planned to start in May, and we did, on the exact day. My schedule was that we would finish that operation October 2nd. You need to know that that operation is now complete. We finished it, and it is August 20th when that was completed. So you see the little check marks that Josh has tracked. He tracked those weekly and reported that down. Every pier has been driven inside the building at this point. So that process is done. So go ahead and go to the next page. We had all these temporary protections that needed to take place. The next part of this are the steel columns. We're underneath the cafeteria floor there. That is an older 50-year-old floor that needs to be reinforced, and so there's a process associated with that. Some of that process is a steel beam. The pink or red columns you see connect to the floor where we just reinforced and put the piers. They drive up and carry the beams that have stanchions on top of them that catch what we call the waffle slab of the floor. And that will eventually catch the floor, and then we'll screw up the columns and tighten the floor, and that floor will be reinforced for the next 50 years or however long we want to keep it. So this process is now ongoing, and some of the beams are already in. Lisa, go ahead.
And I just want to clarify, so this basement work is under the old portions of the school that we will be keeping?
Keeping.
The new portions, someone just asked me about this, the new portions that were built had this work done
Already,
before it
yes.
was put in, right?
The piers have already been put in.
Because someone was like, why are you going back in under the new part? I said, we are not.
We're not.
Was I
This
right?
is all in the
Okay,
existing
good.
piece.
That-
And
thank
that's
you
a
for
good
that
question.
clarification.
I just wanted to clarify that so that I.
Well, and it's
Yeah.
deeper than the cafeteria, this is the heart and soul of the
Okay.
building. This
Right.
is the boiler,
Right.
all of the,
So
go ahead.
Devin brings up a
Yeah.
really good point. All of this pier process, we are basically doing heart-lung bypass surgery on your building right now. It has everything in there. Your heating system, your cooling system, your main electrical distribution is there. Your data distribution is there. And anything else that actually makes the building go is there. All these piers had to be put in right adjacent to that equipment, which in some cases required for us to take systems offline and back online. And so at the very beginning of the project, we started calculating how we're going to do that, and we created windows and worked with Devin to talk about when we could take stuff off and bring things on. And so you'll see the cooling system, water system, fire alarm, electrical, all of those were targeted during a specific shutdown window. We have accomplished all of those things in that window. They're all done. There is one system that is left, and that is the heating system. And the heating system not only has to have the piers put in, but it has to have the beam go over the top of it before we can restore the boiler back in place. 3 of the 4 boilers are back in place now. The 4th one, the steel was set today, so we can now put the 4th boiler back in place. That's the master boiler. That master boiler will go back online by September 2nd, so we'll be prepared for heating conditions in the building. All other systems are already up and running. So I think we've achieved our goals there. There's a week to go. Melanie, go ahead.
So by September 2nd, all the steel beams will be done too?
All the steel beams that we need to get the heating system back up.
Okay.
That's the critical path for us, is to make sure that we don't affect school. And so, but possibly, maybe they will be. The whole basement might be done by then. We are tracking ahead. We're feeling good about it, but maybe not. Josh, go ahead. Okay, we're gonna kind of step upstairs. We've just come out of the basement. We're gonna go to the main level. Inside the cafeteria, one of the first things that I did is in the commons area, I separated that space from the working space on the opposite side in the cafeteria now. And so we put up the wall. That was one of the first things that everybody saw, but I don't even know that the kids know that we're on the other side of the wall, nor do I think they understand the scope that's happening on the other side of the wall. This rubble is from a while back.
Yeah.
Ask Rachel. She
Yeah, we have no idea.
Yeah, okay.
I thought that was for a mural wall or something.
No,
I had
yeah.
idea.
All that was a temporary wall, so that would happen.
Yeah.
That was my goal.
Kids have
that
no idea.
You guys wouldn't know, and we'd just be killing it on the other side. So that's kind of what's going on. If Josh wanted to go to the next slide, this is an indicator of I'd mentioned earlier about the slab and the reinforcing of the slab. These are the epoxy lines that remain from the reinforcing. The slab was saw cut And then impregnated in each one of these waffles on the underside is rebar that is epoxied into the slab. And now, as we're setting the beams underneath that, we will tension that slab, which will make it rigid. And then that'll help keep the building stable for the next 75 years. So this process is already done. So this is also something we've already accomplished over the last little while. That was very critical to even be able to move forward. Without that, we can't even start framing or building the walls inside the structure. But why don't we go to the next slide? Before or during the framing, this is a good indicator right here. Here's your wall. You kids are on the other side, and that hole is about 10 feet deep. 4 feet away on the other side of the wall, down with helical piers that have been driven in. And you have no idea.
No idea.
No idea that it was going on. So the nice part about that is, I don't know if you paid attention last Friday, but we snuck a crane in. We have brought this massive structural steel in. These are the brace frames and the main reinforcement for the cafeteria floor. And so these have been brought in. We snuck a crane in. We pulled all the steel in from the opposite side, slid it in place, and cut holes that big in the roof, and dropped our crane cable through, hooked the beams, and blindly pulled those up, put them in place, and planted them. And then, with the columns, and then we pulled the beams up and hooked them. All blindly through the roof. And that was to minimize impact so the kids didn't, so nobody has the feeling that those guys are flying massive pieces of steel over our head. So all those things have taken place. All the structural steel now is complete on the main level as well. So if we want to go to the next, that has brought us into kind of where we are today. We are framing like crazy. We are about 95% done with all of the framing on the main level right now. And the plumbing, the electrical, the rough end stuff that goes inside the walls, goes in the ceiling, above the ceilings, all that work is ongoing right now. And that's kind of where we are at this moment. Oh, we lost it. I think what was happening, can you reconnect? One thing that I'd love to show you if I could, if it works, some of the software that we're using that we give the district access to is Drone Deploy. It's our 360 software. It might be a little bit pixelated because we're opening it up so quickly, but we have the ability to go into, Josh goes through the building and takes a picture in each room weekly. And so he can go through there. It's pixelated because we're live downloaded, but we can spin through and look at the room on a weekly basis, so we can see the progress as it goes through. I wish the picture was a little bit better, but we'll live without it. But we are employing that. The nice part about Drone Deploy is that's a historical document. So at the end of the project, we can give that historical document to the maintenance departments, and they can go back and look and see what's inside a wall 50 years from now and be able to pull a 360 view of that room. So they'll always have that. It's a huge tool for people down the road. So the outside, up on top, let's go ahead and go to the next picture. Not to be outdone was the roof. The roof contained asbestos, which is a controlled substance. You'll see the men on the roof there bent over. They're also in white. They have little hats on. That's how you can tell. They're in the little hazmat suit pulling off the asbestos material. And so they're bagging it up, and that had to be taken to a landfill where they contain the asbestos and document it. It's tracked forever, and they know where it comes from and know who put it there. And so that work is all now complete. The roof has been completely removed and is now going back on. The structural upgrades have all happened to the roof. That huge beam and columns that I was showing you a minute ago, those are all tied to and welded to that new deck to reinforce the building. So Here in another week, we'll have the roof back on that space and we will be dried in. That roof is only exposed where we're working. It's not where the kids are. So you won't know that this is happening either, but a brand new roof will go on. With the roof, the skylights are in. On the exterior of the site, as we're doing the underground work on in the basement, we of course needed to prepare for the new kitchen and everything associated to it. This is the new grease interceptor that's been planted on the outside of the building, and that was all done through the summer. This is, I believe, the Friday before school started that we had reconnected and re-put the asphalt back in, but all of this exterior work is now ready. And I think if we go to the next picture, we'll see, let's go back to school one more. This is actually an overlay. Oh, go back where you were. There. This is an overlay. The ADA for the STEM is still there. They still have access to it. We've given kids a walkway to access other parts of the building while we still work in this space. And you can tell that this is a dumpster, this is one pickup truck that we have, a couple other pieces of equipment. We are light now on site in that space. We're not affecting that much because we have a significant amount of the work already done. And so, but we've been able to maintain the ADA, the commons area. You guys are still having lunch, you're unimpeded. So I think we've kind of minimized as best we possibly can the impact of the students into the school. And that's been the goal the whole time. So
Awesome, thank you.
uh,
Can I ask a question about lunch from you? Like, do you feel like people still can get lunch in the same amount of time and everything's not too disruptive?
I would say it does get definitely a little bit crowded,
Yeah.
but I think they've done well in setting up tables around the
Great.
commons and the Great Hall. So there's plenty of space for everyone.
Awesome, thanks.
go ahead and go to the next one. As a little part to the end of the project, this came in late. We really didn't discuss that much, but at the end of the project, right before this phase took off, we needed to kind of complete some work on the south end of the football field. Concessions back and forth for the visiting team. They didn't have an ADA pathway back and forth across that. And so we have created an ADA pathway, put in the decorative rock, and kind of touched up that whole south end of the football field. So the asphalt here is new. We have fencing here that's new. We've retained the old pathway that comes down. There's still an opening for the public that's there. And the pathway now comes around the old shed and goes up. There's a new ramp that's been installed. So they have a full pathway right up on there. You're code compliant. So that's one of the last things that we've done. But all that work is complete. You can have your football games. So for the future, let's talk about the future for just a minute. The future right now is firmly in VCVO's hands. I will tell you and report to you as a construction manager, they are doing a fantastic job. They are coordinating with us intensely. We are very comfortable with what they're doing. Our job is to provide updates as much as we can and develop constructability reports. We will be doing that in the next 2.5 weeks. We are expecting a design drawing set today, actually.
It just came in.
Oh, it did it? Okay, so I'll have to take a look. But off of that design development drawing, we're going to put some estimators to work now. We're going to dig into that heavily and try to see where we are financially. I can't tell you today exactly where we are. We have the report from 2 months ago or 3 months ago. But let's work off the newest information that we have. We'll dig into that, and in a couple weeks we'll have something to talk about regarding the new campus. This is what it looks like today. It depends on the DD set and what may happen. It might change, might massage a little bit, but this is kind of the general overview. The new campus, for anyone who might not be familiar, this will be the auditorium, the CTE area. This is band and choral. And then the new administration wing will be here. new parking across the front, and the parking will be expanded on the back. And I don't know, I don't want to take away from VCBO and report on their work too much. I don't appreciate it when anybody else does it for me, so I will leave it. If there's other questions to that, I'd let you talk to VCBO. But in our perspective, they are doing a dynamite job. And so that's kind of how we feel about that. But yes, the big number here is that on the 17th, we'll have a cost estimate of where we are now. The goal for the drawings, I don't think we wrote that down, but the goal for the drawings is to be complete by late November, early December. And that would mean that we can start actively bidding the project and honing things down and see if we can get a final number and go to work. So that's kind of the intent. To sum it up, the cafeteria is on schedule. The key here is the heating system that will be done on September 2nd. I don't think we have too much disruption to classes in session, and the future phases are ongoing and doing well.
So when should the cafeteria be done then?
Cafeteria is tracking right now to be done May 5th. Next year, that's about 2 months early. And we might be earlier than that.
Yeah.
I don't, which might bring up a question. We'll just see. I don't want to promise things too early, Terry, but maybe we turn that over a little earlier. I don't know how that works for you guys if we get done earlier. But to me, everything I want to go as quickly and as efficiently as I can, because I want to put forces on the next phase as soon as I can, because the next phase is a beast. So there's a lot to do there. So we're looking for that. And are any other questions? Melanie, go ahead.
Just you said we would bid late November, December. When would that mean we would start?
I would start in January if I could.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd go immediately.
You'd be able to start while you're also finishing the cafeteria?
Oh, heck yeah.
Heck yeah, okay.
Yeah, we have that
Josh are
capability.
super
Nice. Okay,
They
Lisa?
can
Go
do
ahead.
two things at one time.
And will the new build areas need the piers reinforcing?
Everything will.
Everything will.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, everything will be,
Yeah.
the whole building will
So
have.
January is when we would expect to tell people the parking lot is going away, possibly.
I'm working on that now.
Okay.
So I'm not going to tell you that.
I know.
I'm not going to
I
tell you
was
that.
gonna bring that up. We're having a perfectly lovely
I was
morning.
elevators next.
So-
Getting all of us to our spots.
Attacking the elevators.
I'll have a better answer for you and something to look at next month.
Okay.
If we meet, but not right yet. I'd like to get the design drawings and kind of get my head wrapped around that, build a schedule associated with that. I wasn't kidding. It's a beast. There's a lot going on the next phase. And more than construction, I think my biggest challenge as a manager for you is to keep you in school and keep you functioning with it and minimize my impact. I'm going to impact the project for sure. It's just how little can I make myself and still deliver. So that's kind of what we're trying to do.
But I do think, to your point about parking, the sooner we start having that conversation as a board, there are some alternative ideas people in the community have given us around places we could turn into parking. The better, so that we have a plan in place if possible, and we're communicating with neighbors around that school ahead of time and not just after it's
Just when it's.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think we.
I think that's an important conversation.
That conversation, I think we will have at least 3 months to be able to deliver that information before I go to work.
Because if we're gonna, one suggestion was around a field that could potentially be some parking, maybe anything like that would also require though planning,
There's
with
gonna
like
be a lot
mindful
of
planning
discussion.
around the weather and things like that as well, so that if we were to try to do something like that, we did it when we were able to get it done in time.
Does anyone have other construction questions for Trent and Rachel? I'm gonna call you out specifically since you're a student here. Are there any questions that you like, what about this? Anybody else too? And I'll put Rachel on the spot.
My one question is, with this kind of tentative timeline, does that still put us in the overall timeline of being done 4 years, right?
2029.
2029, okay.
was a fantastic report. Did you have anything, Rachel?
I don't think so.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for being here, Trent.
Yes, thank you for having us.
Your team is doing a
Thank you.
fantastic job. Thank you, Josh.
I have a great team, and I can't say enough good things about the young man behind you there that's running the computer. He is.
Would we be able to get some of these pictures that you showed us tonight that we would be able to share with our constituents and things?
Whatever you
Some
want.
of your progress?
Yeah.
Send it to
We're open
Devin.
book, whatever you
Yeah,
want.
just send it to Devin. Rachel?
Yeah.
If you'd like to have us deliver the report, you can have it.
Okay.
You know, but
Yeah, we need to post the report online, but yeah, the pictures,
The slides would be great.
Yeah.
just
Yeah, the
for,
slides
like,
are great.
On our
I've already
construction.
asked Devin to get
Yeah,
it
Sean
ready.
already asked
Okay,
me.
good job.
And I mean, Josh has done an amazing job getting the
Yes.
pictures. I've been watching the pictures over the last few months as the project has been going, and it's been really cool to watch everything that they've been able
Are
to
we
do.
putting those on our website so people can see them?
No, we'll figure out something where
Okay.
maybe we can post a picture, not all of them, because there are a lot, but we could post some of them where we could show some of them.
Okay, Rachel.
And can anyone access the drone photos or
no.
only for the district?
Yeah,
Alright.
we keep that pretty locked down.
Sounds good.
And Devin has access to it. There's very limited people that have that, and that's by design.
Yeah.
Later on, we'll give that to the district. It'll become their document.
Sounds
But
good.
right now, we have ownership of it.
Maybe we'll get a few posted. Okay, well, thank you for being here. We
Thank you for
appreciate
having
it.
us.
All right, we'll move
Thank
on
you,
to our
Trent.
next agenda item. Item G, our LEA specific licenses, and we'll turn it over to Deputy Superintendent Jason Cox.
Good evening, school board. Thank you for this opportunity to come visit with you this evening. As we get back into school every year, we have a few people who either have changed assignments or have come to us from different states, or there's a lot of different reasons why someone may need an LEA specific license. They're actually, out of the 840 teachers that we have, there's not that many that we're asking you to approve tonight. And many of those, you'll see on the list, there's people like interns who the state just hasn't approved. They haven't received all the information from the college, the university yet. And then there's other people who are teaching new courses, like Karen Brown, former principal of Provo High, is teaching, a Welcome to Education course, which is new in CTE, and so she doesn't have the credential for that, but she's definitely qualified. So we wanted to make sure we shared this information with you. The state moved up the timeline. In the past, the timeline for approval from the school board was October 15th, and they moved it up to September 1st. So that's why we have this information ready to go for you tonight. And any questions? Yes?
I was just curious if there's a reason why Timpview seems to have a higher percentage of, and Centennial as well, like the east side has a lot more than the west side of our secondary teachers. Is there a specific reason for that?
Not that I know of. Honestly, I believe most of these people are really close in having the license. It's just that the state, sometimes in the timing of them receiving all the information of the endorsements, or again, if they're new to us, they've just moved into the state, sometimes it just takes time for the person who has to evaluate their license to be able to then grant that credential. And so I don't believe I think it's a little bit interesting that it's that side tonight. It could be the other side.
Okay.
It has been the other side in years past. So I think it just rotates around to who hired people this year and may have come from different places.
Another question, the state board is looking to approve a new rule that would allow teachers to basically test for a credential instead of having to take certain courses. Like if they know the content, they can just test out of it basically.
Mm-hmm.
Would this affect how many of these we have to approve? Like would it make this number go down?
It would depend on what they allow the tested areas to be in.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a great question. Like for instance, they work with CTE specifically, where some of them don't even need to have the credential to be able to work for us this year. And so it really depends on what the state determines is the most need, and that they want to be able to allow that assessment piece to be in play for that teacher. for that
But anyone who
category.
could take that test, they would just get their license faster.
Yep.
And so they wouldn't have to go through this process probably.
Right, right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Jason? This will be on our agenda for business meeting to approve tonight.
Yeah.
Gina.
Why, I should probably know the answer to this. Why is it so important that the school board has to vote on this?
It's very important for the school board to vote on it because if we, let's say as a district, we weren't making the effort to go out and have licensed people and getting that cleaned up, it makes you have the ability to be aware of how many of those people we have in our classrooms throughout the district and whether or not we're doing a good job of trying to make sure people are certified and, you know, in the area that they're teaching. So I think it's mainly awareness.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Jason.
Thanks, Thank you. Jason.
All right, we'll now move on to item H, boundary discussion. So after our board meeting last time, when we planned the agenda tonight, we decided to bring back just, it seemed that the interest right now was to talk about the triangle, that's like the nickname, for the area where Sunset View, Franklin, and Spring Creek boundaries are all kind of right there together. So that's the point of this discussion tonight. And for those watching our meeting tonight, just know this is just a discussion. We want to get to a point where we might be able to make a decision, but even once we do that, we go through a process where it's a very public thing. We get input, it's on several agenda, several meetings, and if any changes were decided upon, they would not go into place until next school year. We would not disrupt this school year. So, shall I turn to Wendy, Devin?
So I'm going to project just so we can get our bearings.
Can I ask a question? I didn't see this in board docs, so is this from an email that you sent with boundary information that I have from earlier in August, or?
I sent a link to it when I sent the board update, but yes, it came in August, earlier in August, and then when I sent the board update, it was linked in there.
Okay.
I think.
But
Is that where you got the map from?
for updated info, so I'm
Okay.
It's the info that they provided for us a few months ago that I did send the spreadsheet.
Oh, sorry. I didn't see
Nope,
this.
you're good, but we'll talk about something different.
There's no info.
There's no
link that you
I
sent.
may have got there from that link. Sorry.
Wait, let's see.
The one from Gina?
No,
So
that's her
thi-
follow-up.
This
Yeah,
is
those
our
are your
current,
questions.
and,
Yeah.
and
There's
there,
one right.
a lot of this discussion is around complications from transportation and some of the things that we've been talking about, just so as we're making the decision, we have all of the information so we're not impacting people.
So I would recommend not looking up that email, guys, because I think Devin's going to talk to us about some different aspects of it,
So
and we can
these are
find
the
out later.
current boundaries as they stand right now. One of the issues was this separation here of the Franklin boundaries, this separation here of the Edgemont boundaries, and then some of these areas that are a little bit ski-wampus. So the new boundaries are addressing more than this, but I'm just going to talk a little bit about the impacts of the transportation on the main ones, and some of the recommendations that were provided for me by our transportation director, just to create better efficiencies within our district. So let me make this a little bit smaller. So you'll see now that the bottom triangle that was in Franklin would move to Sunset View, and then this area up here, which has quite a few kids, would move into Franklin. And then a couple of the other ones, this would become in the Canyon Crest boundary, although there's a different recommendation based on the number of kids and the busing situation, and a couple of other ones that transportation has an issue with. So the transportation.
So, sorry, can I
yes.
clarify really quickly? So what we're talking about today is the triangular area, but this report here that you're showing us now has recommendations for other areas, but we're not going to make those changes this year, correct?
Well, we're not. We can talk about them, but that's
Okay.
not our intention. Is just to review all of the
Okay.
information and see if there are other changes we could make at the
This year.
same time.
I mean, for next year.
For next year, but
Okay.
these are not at all recommendations. They're just the thoughts.
Okay.
Okay?
Can I also clarify, so you showed Franklin and Sunset View, were they basically swapping some?
So
Did that
this,
affect
yes,
Spring Creek
it
at
would
all?
be, it does not impact Spring
Okay,
Creek at all.
So just those two.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
So what it does, so here's the railroad tracks in here, so it takes and puts, instead of having Sunset View where they would go this way, but a lot of them choiced into Franklin because it was close, it would take that area. So here's a couple of the impacts. And I made notes because I don't remember this much information off the top of my head on a So in the area that is currently here, there are 58 kids that go to Sunset View that are in this area, that are that not 58 kids, but 58 kids who would qualify for busing if we went across there. There are 53 of those kids that are choicing into Franklin. That's the ones that we've had discussions about with the ones that are wanting a bus route, but there is a safe crossing, and so there's that debate. What would happen with this is you would require 2 additional unfunded routes because there's 111 kids between those two groups that would all qualify for those bus routes. So this area here, changing that and providing the bus to Franklin would require 2 additional buses.
So it wouldn't change busing at Sunset View, but it would change
It would not
at
change.
Franklin.
It would not change it because these kids do walk.
Okay.
We didn't. This area still is. There's quite a few kids, but a lot of it is industrial, so there's not as many kids here. It's not quite as impactful. And so then when you look at, I know a couple of the concerns has been this. Oh, hey, could you quickly? Thank you.
Could you?
Just every once in a while, just.
Yeah, I will. I gotcha.
This area here, that's the area for Sunset View, Spring Creek, that is west of University Avenue. I know that's been a question. There are 108 kids who qualify for busing here. So that 108 kids is a significant portion of our Spring Creek elementary population and would again require a couple of buses to go down to Sunset View. So there's a lot of impact and transportation.
Why would they go to Sunset View?
Or Franklin, just depending on where we went, but there's 108 kids in that area.
Would they be additional buses? Because with those kids on that part of the Spring Creek boundary are already getting bused.
It would depend on where we put them, because the amount of space between the distance. So I didn't do a lot of that measuring.
Right.
I'm just telling you kind of the number of kids and what that impacts.
I guess in my mind I'm thinking 108 no longer need to be bused to Spring Creek because they're all bused to Spring Creek.
Correct, but there are a few different routes in there that go and would also go to Centennial. So it's just the rerouting.
Okay.
None of this would necessarily create brand new routes.
Got it.
The Franklin one would probably create a brand new route, but at least one. So we didn't get into the number of buses because we're just kind of, what is the impact first before we start thinking about, okay, this is really what we want to do. So now let's go through the logistics of what that's going to look like. So this area here, so this is not a recommendation, this is just I asked the transportation director what in our transportation doesn't make sense in our boundaries. If you had a little bit, this area that is currently in Edgemont, that if we changed any boundaries up here would go to Canyon Crest. There is 2 kids in here that are bused to Rock Canyon. So moving these kids to Rock Canyon would it be a super easy transportation change because they could pick up those kids on that current route that is there.
And I was going to actually ask that area, why not Rock Canyon as opposed to Canyon?
Correct, and that's these are the kinds of ideas that we can come up with and say, okay, now let's implement these changes into our boundaries and redraw lines that maybe we want to see done. But moving this would have a significant impact on the Spring Creek
on their
side.
population.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Debbie, can I ask one more clarifying?
Yes, oh no, you can ask
So
me as
sorry.
many questions as you would like.
In that Carterville area, the two that could go to Rock Canyon, they're not currently being bused, they would just be able to be bused?
No, there are 2 kids that actually are
Are
that
they
are
in the
that are
Rock Canyon
busable.
Are they in the Rock Canyon
Yes,
boundary?
so down in this very
Oh,
corner.
I see, thank you. I thought it was like, that's in the
It's a bus, it's that street that's right behind Macy's grocery store.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They
okay.
get bused up to.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Okay.
And they're right next to
Then the other thing that he said would make a huge difference is that area just right here at the edge of Carterville Road. There's one street, I think there's like 10 houses that are on the top of the hill.
Yeah.
And then the bottom of the hill, but the top of the hill currently goes up to Canyon Crest.
Or Edgemont?
If they were there, yes, in Edgemont currently.
This is it.
And I'm looking at, it's just right here next to that Parkway Plaza, is that the name of the? Anyway, so those are at the top of the hill, so it's just a little sliver. Currently it's 6 students and they're all at Tempe and Centennial, but if there were ever students, those 6 kids are up at the top of the hill, all the rest of the ones that are bused are at the bottom of the hill.
Wait, so the recommendation would be to have them go
Just to have this little sliver go to Westridge.
Go to Westridge, okay.
And this be
At the top of the hill, because it doesn't impact a neighborhood. So.
But Westridge is our most utilized school in terms of capacity.
Yep, without the portables on the outside. The other spot that we talked about, this is one of the probably the most impactful. This area currently is in Sunset View. This is an unfunded route. It's one of the hazardous routes that was set a few years ago. And that bus is already pretty full. You'd be adding another unfunded bus route down to Amelia, because they would be even further east, but still not qualify for the 1.5 miles.
If we move that section to Amelia. Is
Yep,
that
if
what
you
you're
move this
saying?
section to Amelia instead of Sunset View. So it's always interesting when you talk about boundaries, because one thing impacts about 6
Yes.
others.
Right, so this idea, we're just gonna deal with this triangle here. It's just, it seems in my mind still hard not to, the impacts everywhere else.
Correct, but
It's-
this
it's hard to
triangle
understand.
does make, the triangle and then the change up here
Yeah.
are probably the ones that make the most sense neighborhood-wise, and the way that things are, we would have an impact on transportation here if we decided to bus all of the kids.
To Franklin.
Yes, that's the only.
Explain to me why these are unfunded routes.
Because they're not 1.5 miles away from the school. So, and the state, the hazardous route rules are a little wonky. So when you're looking at them, if there is not a safe spot to walk, then they would deem it as a funded hazardous route. But if there is a safe spot somewhere along that trail, they won't fund it. And we're actually only funded at 75% of our costs already.
Do they come out and actually assess these walking places?
No.
Like, I'm so curious what information is given about the walkability of
I
the
think
spot.
they probably look at Google Maps is what they do.
And if you report it wrong, you would not be well liked.
Correct.
So then they would make you pay back a lot.
Sure, I am not saying we should.
No, I wasn't suggesting that. I just,
That-
I think it's just the threat of they would pull funding.
Yeah,
Right.
there are
Really
very
high.
very few hazardous routes funded in the state.
So
I see. Okay, that's
they
just
think
easy.
it's not hazardous to cross the railroad tracks, so.
Because there is
sidewalk.
there is a sidewalk across it with railroad crossings further down on the
Haven't you
trail.
seen 6-year-olds that are capable of crossing a railroad track, right?
Because all kids go the long way to get the safe way across, right?
There's still a train.
Very
in the middle of
logical.
it all, yeah.
Okay. I don't think we should expect them to go the long way, right?
Okay, so I think tonight, the rest of this discussion is just what other questions do we need to get answers to before we can have an actual discussion amongst the board members of what about this, what about that? Okay, Gina.
Cost. If we were to make just the changes, not just the changes in the bottom triangular area, what impact does that have on our current transportation budget?
So it really depends. Most of our unfunded routes, I believe, are between 15 and 21,000 for a route. That's not including the cost of the bus.
Okay.
So that's just the annual cost.
So within that, remind me, if we do those changes, are we going to need additional buses, and if so, how many?
We would, so depending on what we end up doing, there could be a bus saved on one side.
Okay.
And so that bus could then shift, but it would also kind of have the domino effect of if we shift a bus, that bus may be driving a different direction on their second half of their route. And so it's just rearranging things and possibly changing some start times of schools to
So
make
we
sure.
don't, so there's no really like general idea of how much that would cost us,
Correct.
and whether we have that money in the budget?
Correct. We would have to purchase at least one bus.
Okay. Thank you.
Lisa?
I have one question. The maps I'm looking at have a set of different revised boundaries. There are 6 different revised boundary maps.
Those are not ones we're talking about.
Yeah, those are
No,
not
I
ones.
understand, but I'm just saying, in 4 of those 6 are different, maybe 5 of those 6 are versions of. I'm just wondering, can we actually get, when we have our next conversation, like a set of options drawn on a map that can sit by each other?
Yes.
So we can look at those together and just be
Sort of
really
like
clear.
an overhead projector where you used to be
Yeah,
able to
overlay.
just overlay it.
If we could
That
just
was
do
way
it.
better.
But I wanna see them, if possible, it would be great anyway, to see them at the same time and just be able to see those subtle differences
That's a
and
good point.
So,
and then with
yeah.
them, the numbers.
Yeah,
How
and
do those move our numbers?
MGT, I gave them this information on Friday.
Yeah.
And
No,
they're
that's fine.
they're doing another, so they are working on getting new maps that show everything,
Mhm.
all the requested information that we sent them. But that might take another week or so.
No, that's fine. I'm just saying that would be a
Okay.
format I think that would be helpful to
That is the
kinda
plan.
look at it, and if it has, how does this impact and change number enrollment possibly?
Right.
And what would the cost differential be with each choice? I think that's a nice decision framework anyway, I think.
Well, and I think if we can take what MGT gives us and then add to it, and on this one, this is where we currently have, you know, students choicing into Franklin, but now they'd be in the down, like, put in some of that transportation and those details, like, I feel like somehow we just need to zoom in on that triangle a little bit more.
Yeah.
And even what you explained today, Devin, you did a great job, but I'm still lost, right? Like, wait, who's where and who's actually choicing in and how many would not, have currently been choicing in but would now be eligible to, or would now be in the boundary, right? Like, just, if we can clarify that in a chart
Right.
on
There are
paper.
53 kids in that little area that are choicing
Yeah.
to Franklin. And 58 that are currently that are going to Sunset View, that would come to Franklin based on the new boundaries. So.
I'm wondering, because I do think Troy's information is actually quite helpful in this, can we get MGT to drop our boundaries based on what Troy has recommended?
Uh-huh.
And look at that, and then
Yep.
Troy can ascertain the cost that would be associated with that.
Right.
Because I think he has a little bit, because his people drive those routes every
Yes.
day, so he probably knows a little bit more than this out-of-state company. It's just looking at numbers, and then MGT can determine what that does to the numbers overall, the capacity, and then Troy's adding the cost. And I think maybe if we could do that for all-day board meeting or something,
Yeah.
that might be helpful.
I will test my artistic ability and draw maps for them that they can then draw into their.
Make Troy do it.
Delegate.
Troy, we'll get on a call with Troy so we can make sure that we have all of that.
We've got
information.
artists in HR. I've seen them decorate their offices. I can draw.
Devin, can I
Definitely not me.
just to, a little bit to what you were speaking to, my concern, and we'll obviously address this, outside of kind of the Sunset View Franklin discussion, I think that triangle across University Avenue for Spring Creek was part of the catalyst, right? Those kids are closer now to Shoreline, closer to Sunset View, but it sounds to me that would
It's a very
significantly,
densely
it would
populated.
significantly impact Spring Creek's enrollment.
Correct.
So that in my
Yeah.
mind, that's kind of was the point of like change, but then that really
And
impacts
I
that
mean,
school.
when we were actually looking at numbers, that significantly overfilled Franklin and
Yes,
put
okay.
Spring Creek at about
Yeah.
55%
Yeah.
of their capacity. So you have 105% at Franklin and 55%, with really
Yeah.
no way to account for any possible growth down on the west side where there's still homes
Right.
that are being built. And I know there were questions about the new development next to Spring Creek. One of the issues when you're wondering about developments is you know, there's been several developments in Lakeview over the last few years that have not moved the needle on their
Right.
enrollment because there's not a lot of younger kids in that area. It has impacted our secondary enrollment, but not our
Sure.
elementary enrollment, which could be the same impact in these homes that are being built up by Spring Creek. I don't know what that, it's really hard to gauge what that impact will be, and how many kids we'll get from those homes.
Sure.
Because right now, with like Spring, or in the Lakeview area, we're getting less than one student per home. So that was built. So it's, if I had a crystal ball, I would, it would be really nice.
Well, I think MGT has a formula that they can at least estimate, right?
And they're
I just
estimating
couldn't-
less
I could
than
not
one
remember.
student per
Okay.
home.
Yeah, that's fair.
Well, that's what I'm also wondering too, like if you're looking at the cost of the homes in Spring Creek, that can kind of give you an indication of what type of family's gonna move in, like if they have teenage kids or young kids versus what's in Lakeview. I
I
feel like those are.
some of them
they're
are condos
like
too.
Yeah.
Part of their
Formula.
condos,
And
there
then
might not be
their
any kids.
houses
Yeah,
on
so-
small lots. and-
Okay.
yeah.
So, the feedback I've gotten from the neighborhoods is people who live north of this want to walk to Franklin, and people who live south of this understand they're going to be bused no matter what, so they don't really care.
What line was that? Was that 300 South?
No, 300 south
I think
is way
it's
up here.
600
Yeah, I think
south.
it's
This is going to be like
Or maybe
oh,
900.
Yeah,
This
because
is going to
6
be
goes-
10th south.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's the other thing I really need on this map is
Because you have
street
6
view.
right
Yeah,
now.
that's
Street
okay.
view.
Well,
Yeah, that's
yeah,
what
we
I
can
thought.
zoom in a little too.
Oh, zooming in, it would be really nice if zooming in really did anything. It
Well, I
just-
mean, if we generally are purposely
Yes.
drawing a zoomed in map, then, yeah.
Right.
Okay. All right, do you guys think of anything else in the next couple of days? Then please send the questions in to Devin, but copy the board on it so we all know, so we don't all send the same question. But let's, like, get it in so that we can then move forward on those questions.
Can you make a deadline, cause if you don't, then I won't stick to it.
By Thursday.
Thursday, got it, Thursday, people.
Just say by Friday.
Friday, people.
Look at Lisa. How about Monday of next week?
On Labor Day?
Yeah, Tuesday of next week. Cause that'll still
Is
give
that
us
enough
enough
time?
time to get it by the all-day board meeting.
Oh, sure.
Do I hear
All
Tuesday?
day.
Do I hear Wednesday?
Give me a
Tuesday, September 2nd.
Is that more doable?
By when?
Tuesday, September 2nd.
Thank you. Devin, thank you for
Look how
Getting
nice
all those
Wendy
numbers.
is. I'm not.
Hmm.
Okay.
She's like,
Okay.
9:45 p.m. tonight.
Now, well, I know for me, if I like go home and then I tell myself till Tuesday, I'm not gonna think about it again, and then, yeah. Anyway.
No, but then it's all on me. If I don't think about it, then
Okay.
no problem.
So if you need to be like me, tell yourself you have the day to keep thinking about it. Okay, large purchase requests. We'll turn that to Devin as well.
So we have 2 large purchase requests. The first one is the Centennial boiler. This one is on the rotation, plus there are issues with one of the boilers. And so this will help create the efficiency of having the redundancy and will work all winter long. So that
Will
one
this be replaced before winter?
I believe it is scheduled to be
No,
done.
there's no heat.
No,
I just wanted, I just didn't know.
No,
That's
I
a good
believe
question.
this will be, their goal is to have it done before winter.
Okay.
I noticed their hours are the same as school on the contract or whatever it was that we saw. Is that gonna disrupt school to have the boiler be done?
It shouldn't in the boiler room, so yeah, we should be fine. We've replaced lots of boilers during school and
Okay.
It hasn't really been an issue. Unless it's 30 degrees outside, then there might be an issue with that. The second one is the safety glass and the interior windows. So the new rule is the strength has to be heavier than what they had originally planned on interior instructional areas, and then the entry areas. And so this funding is our old security grant that we received last year that paid for all of the schools to have theirs. The state would only allow us to do safety glass on those schools that were in the grant. So this is actually being paid for by the remaining money that we had in that grant. So it's not on balance. They're hoping to get this school, Provo High is this one, and then the second one will be one of the other schools' interiors, depending on how much money is left after this one. So those are the two.
Okay, any questions for Devin about the first one? Okay, those will be on our business meeting to approve tonight. And now Wendy.
Woohoo,
you're up.
policies.
So
Okay,
many policies.
can I project mine? Is that okay?
So we're gonna start with our first reading.
Yep, and let's see here. I just want to show you a masterpiece for a hot second. So we created a policy spreadsheet. Yeah, well, anyway, this has all of the model policies and then the district policy,
Wow.
what it is, and then as we update them when they're going to policy committee, and then the board readings in there for each of the series. So I think we are at over 300 right now, but some of them are very minor. Like some of them are going to be really fast. So
When do you sleep?
a lot. I sleep a lot actually. What's really nice about this actually is that I've assigned them out to lots of different people.
Yeah.
So we don't have so other people are helping with all of these, so they're not all me. And HR has a whole bunch. I'm really excited for them.
I just meant making your spreadsheet. I
Oh,
love
that
it.
is
Yeah,
awesome.
I've just been working on it through the summer. So.
Okay.
General policy question, do we need to relook at our, I don't know if it's a policy or just something that we do, to have 2 readings for everyone? Because there are some that we have to update according to law, so it doesn't matter really what feedback we get, it has to be updated. Like, are there some that we could just have one, you know what I mean, like one reading?
We talked about that in policy
Okay.
meetings, about whether or not it needs to go to a second reading or not.
Okay.
And some of the operations ones won't
Right.
be a second reading.
I don't know if that will help us get through the 3
Yeah, I think so.
policies,
I probably will.
okay, so that just,
Probably will.
policy committee will figure out what those are and then.
Our next job is Bonnie and I are going to sit down and figure out which policies are going to show up at which policy committee so that everybody knows when those policies are due, and we'll just spread it out over the years, so it should be all right. Okay, so we have one policy that's on a first reading, and then the rest are all second readings. So this one is policy 1103. I did attach this into board docs so you can look at it, but I'm also projecting it here. This is just about vacancies on the Board of Education, and it was a change that occurred because they didn't have a specific timeline if there was a death of a board member, and so they've extended the amount of time that you have to fill a vacancy if that vacancy results from the death of a board member. You do have to notify the county clerk if there is a vacancy on the board. They still have to create a conflict of interest disclosure statement, and as soon as you receive, as the Board of Education, a letter of resignation from someone saying it's effective as of this date, then you can go ahead and start that refilling of that process. It's just that person won't take over that role until that resignation occurs. So we can go ahead and put it on the website for feedback. We just thought a second reading on September 9th with possible approval. Any questions on that policy?
I did.
Yeah.
In the first paragraph, the lines 16 through 18 in the blue, it seems really confusing. Like, who's in charge of filling the vacancy? It says the board, but then it also says the county, and then it also says the city council.
No, it
So
who's
in charge?
So the board will fill it within 45 days after it occurs, or or if they don't do it in that 45 days, then it's the county legislative body or municipal legislative body would do it by appointment. So it basically says if you don't do it within 45 days, these other groups will do it.
Would it help to split that sentence?
So we can make that clear.
Sentence or say
Yeah.
Yeah,
otherwise, maybe.
It's kind of confusing.
Yeah, you bet.
But also, like, okay, the county or the city council, well, which one? Because this is very vague.
Because
Like,
you would
which one?
notify the county, and then the county tells you who is the person who's responsible for your particular school district. That's my understanding of the law.
This language came from the state model policy.
But
is
I'll
that
look
correct?
at the actual law.
Okay.
That's tied to it.
Yeah, because this seems pretty confusing.
Similarly, I thought the next paragraph was super confusing, and I'm like, wait, this is probably straight from state language, so I looked it up and it is. So I don't know if we want to clarify or just leave it the state
We can
language.
put it in
but
ChatGPT
I
and
had
if
to
it's
read
on
it
there.
about 6 times to understand what they meant by the 14 days and the 2 years and the.
It's kind of an awesome, that entire paragraph is one sentence.
I thought it was pretty great.
So,
I mean,
if we can clarify,
Or dependent clauses.
that'd be great, but I also understand
do
just
that.
leaving it the way the state wrote it, cause it's their law. Anything else on this policy?
I think we should make it our goal to make it clearer than.
Let's make it clearer.
Okay. Okay, so now we'll go into second readings. The first one is policy 5280, disciplinary action, orderly termination, suspension, and non-renewal. I put a lot of different things on here to just point out. So I'm just going to highlight a couple of things and then let you ask some questions. If you look at lines 70 through 83, you'll notice it has the definition of career employee. And originally it just talked about a successful completion of the 3 years, and it was like, what does successful completion actually mean? And so we added, you have to be having an effective or highly effective rating to be moving into a career status. And notice that you also have to perform all of your contractual duties in addition to that. So it's that I'm doing all of the stuff that I'm supposed to do, plus I'm performing well as an educator. So we added that in there. You'll notice some strikeouts on lines 90 through 92, which we've talked about, where it talked about you have the ability to move somebody to a provisional status if they're moving from one assignment to another. So let's say we have a teacher that's moving from 4th grade and then to 4th grade special ed, then you can start them over in a provisional status. The concern from the association was, well, what if I have a high needs area? That might be something that would deter someone from doing that, especially when they're an experienced educator. And we actually feel like that through the performance evaluations, if a teacher isn't performing, we would have a way to handle that. We don't need to necessarily keep them in provisional status to be able to do that. There's still a process by which we can remediate teachers in that. So we did remove that language. And then lines 98 through 99, supervisor shall determine if provisional status is extended for longer than 1 year for those who are moving into a supervisory specialist or director role. So we're acknowledging that you will go provisional. So if I'm coming as a teacher and move to an assistant principal, for example, that your provisional status is going to be in place for at least 1 year. At that point, could be as long as 3 years, so that we don't have a situation of someone who's like, well, I've been a career educator, maybe they're not a great administrator and they shouldn't be in that supervisory role, then we have some ability to move those individuals back to the classroom. Provisional contracted employees, these are licensed employees that are within their first 3 years. And you'll notice on lines 115 to 117, it talks about an emerging or minimally effective or not effective score on their formal evaluation. And we changed this language because in the model policy it says receipt of a complaint from a parent, and we would never discipline or terminate an individual, just based on a single complaint. I mean, obviously if it was really severe, like they slapped and beat up a kid, okay, that's one thing, but then you're terminating for a different reason. But we wanted to state that it's a documented series of complaints or expressions of concerns that creates uncertainty about their professionalism. So we added that language. And then also line 123, to allow people who have experience prior to coming to Provo, that they at least have to have 3 years of teaching experience with successful evaluations. But so no one with less than 3 years, fewer than 3 years, can advance beyond provisional status. But if I've been teaching for 15 years in Michigan and I'm an awesome educator and I come here and I do 1 year of provisional status, we should be able to say, okay, you're done with provisional status, you're awesome, we want to keep you. Any questions up to that point? I'm not even flowing through this very well, I'm just line 163, we added this, and this is also in a separate policy, but an employee who sells their preparation period to teach an additional class recognizes that this assignment is temporary, may be eliminated at any time as per policy. We referenced the other policy there. And then what you're going to notice is all of these definitions of unsatisfactory performance, dismissal, or termination, but where it starts to really apply is at line 200. So what you're going to notice is there's basically 2 tracks down which you can go. You can terminate someone for cause, okay, and that's the list that's happening from lines 202 through 256. So it's these things, and usually it's not going to be one incident unless it's very egregious as to what happens, but it's usually you're seeing just a pattern. They've been given a directive not to do it and they continue to do it, and then you would end up, you can dismiss for cause. The second piece of this starts on line 259. This is termination for unsatisfactory performance. So this is more about your teaching ability, and in a performance piece, we have to put in place a plan of assistance for the employee to give them that mentoring and that support. And then the principal goes back in and reevaluates to determine if the performance has improved as a result of that professional assistance. You bet.
So in 255,
yep.
It lists unsatisfactory performance in a list of cause. Is the
yep.
difference that the unsatisfactory performance is just to not renew, but the other one, the cause, you can terminate at any time? Like, why is not unsatisfactory performance in the cause?
Because then it becomes cause if you have not improved as a result of the professional assistance. So then it can be considered for cause, but it also is falling under this other category here as well, that you can terminate. Let's see.
So Wendy, with that,
yeah.
they have to like meet that burden of like, we've had this plan, you haven't met these requirements, right? When it's in the cause category.
Yep.
Right.
Okay. Okay, let's see what else. I'm going through all of and this used to be, by the way, a policy that was in a policy and a procedure. We've just put it all into a procedure. And then you'll notice that individuals that have career status can request, they can request a hearing. There's different protections that are in place for individuals who have that career status. So you'll notice on line 392, a notice of intention not to renew the contract of a career employee, or if you're terminating their contract during the term, then they can have, then that employee can request a hearing in that process, and they would ask for that hearing directly to the superintendent. They can also request an informal conference to just talk about what's happening with their specific, like if they really feel like something is unjust, and sometimes that's happened where they feel like an evaluation isn't fair and they want an informal conference to go over it. We usually can go all of that route before it goes to a hearing or something more serious to address any issues that we have. We can put an employee on paid administrative leave. That's typically what we do. This is on line 451. We don't just suspend if we're doing an investigation, particularly if it's for cause. then we put an employee usually on paid administrative leave, because you don't wanna assume that the person is guilty. So when you put them on paid administrative leave, it means we're just distancing you from the organization so that we can investigate and determine whether or not there is sufficient evidence of the situation. And then notice that lines 460 through 468, we can reduce staff if one of those four things happen. We have declining enrollments, or the discontinuance of a particular service or program, or say there's a shortage of revenue. You know, like a great example of this could be if the Utah Fits All scholarship is deemed unconstitutional and they come back and say, okay, then all of your salary adjustments, then we could say we have two choices. Each of our employees can take a huge pay cut, or we can choose to do a reduction in the number of teachers that we have. So there'd be some ways in which we can do that without going through all of those other pieces of the performance or the cost piece. And note that no verbal agreements count for anything.
So I know we got some feedback from the website. Did the policy committee have a chance to look at that? It was specifically line 461.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this particular policy, that particular question actually doesn't have anything to do with this particular piece, because they were concerned about individuals who they're writing in particular about a teacher whose contract isn't full, and so what the principal was trying to do was to add additional assignments to keep them into a full-time position. And yes, I would say that doesn't have anything to do with that particular piece, in the sense that they're trying to keep them employed. And so yes, there isn't a discontinuance, but there is a reduction in terms of the number of students that were there that were being impacted at that particular school. So that does fall under that.
So I thought though this idea was a good one to think about, like what happens when we do have a program that's discontinued, or one of those things that's listed in our policy 1 through 4 there, around decisions, like how do we communicate around
that's in a separate policy, so
okay,
we have that all lined out in a reduction in force
Okay.
policy.
So should one of us respond to that, or has someone already responded to her?
I can respond.
Give us just last week.
Thank you. Yeah. I'm happy to do it, except I'm kind of present. We just talked about it.
Yeah, because I think those were good questions.
And then if there's anything that's, you'll notice that it states that we do have to refer to UPAC if there's something that falls under those requirements to report.
And our education associations weighed in on this.
Yeah, they asked a lot of questions and we answered those questions, and we changed a lot of the language as a result of it. So, and a lot of it is coming from updated state law too. So there was like a question of, can we count the intern year as one of the years of provisional status, and you actually cannot. That's in state statute that you're not allowed to do that. So there's some things that we have some restrictions on what we can and cannot do there. So okay, next one. Oh, I gotta hurry faster. Okay, 3325. Here we go. Equal educational opportunities basically says we do not discriminate on the basis of sex, not in schools or in employment. And we cannot prevent any students from participating in any school program or activity because of race, sex, cultural background, sexual orientation, gender identification. If there is discrimination, then you report it to the Title IX coordinator, which is listed in the policy. I did put an example here on lines 22 through 25. It is important to note that if you do have a different gender identity, you have to participate in the areas that are allowed by law. So under UHSAA, if I'm a transgendered student, I have to participate in the sport that is based on the sex that is identified on my birth certificate. So there are some stipulations that require us to follow that piece of it. Yeah.
And we were talking about finding clarification around, is it identified on your birth certificate or?
I'm gonna get to that. So that's in policy 3300, and I did double check that. So yeah. Let's see. Also lines 35 to 46. Facilities must be comparable for sex-designated sports and activities, and that also includes the scheduling of facilities. You can't always give like girls, for example, the worst times for practice and that type of thing. Confidentiality is kept by the district when an investigation starts. However, when you lodge a complaint against someone, they have a right as the respondent to know what the complaint is about, and so there's a limit to how much that anonymity can be protected. So sometimes people are like, I demand that I remain anonymous, and it's like, well then I can't investigate this because I am going to have to give specific details about the situation, and they're probably going to figure out where this complaint is coming from. And then lines 114 through 119, we do not discriminate against students with disabilities, and that we will be incorporating this policy into our online registration process and the application process for potential employees. We already have it in a different format, but it will be updated as we deal with applicants. So our recommendation is that we adopt this policy. Questions? Yeah.
Quick question just about like facilities and practice times. Is that would that be like our athletic directors who are kind of monitoring that and just kind of aware of what that looks like?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it'd be things like, for example, I had a situation where I had same site, same night, so my girls and boys basketball teams were playing in the same location. And so originally our region had said we were going to flip, so every week it would flip, so girls would be first, would be the 5:15 game, then boys would be 7, the next week it would flip. But when we actually went to the girls' coaches, they actually didn't want it flipped, and so they voted and said, no, we want to keep it at the 5:15 because we actually end up, it's actually more hurtful if the people come to show up for the boys' game, and then when the girls' game starts, everybody gets up and leaves. And they said that's devastating to our female athletes, and so we would prefer to have the earlier game because it's more likely that people will come and then just stay through for the boys' game. So it's just about demonstrating that you're bringing in that feedback as to what that looks like. Policy 3360, district notification of juvenile or student offenders. This is just updated policy that we have to notify the principal within 3 days of receiving information from the courts. Student services is really the designee that I have set up, so they are the ones that are notified. You'll think that lines 20 to 23 and 34 to 37 are the same, but they are not. So 20 to 23 is if the juvenile is taken into custody, and 34 to 37 is if they're adjudicated for a serious offense.
Right.
Then it kicks in those notification processes. Note that anytime we're bringing in a student that has committed a serious offense, we do a threat assessment, we pull together a multidisciplinary team and develop a reintegration plan. If there is a victim that's at that particular school, that victim has to be notified that that individual is coming back, and there has to be an assessment that there are security measures in place for that individual, or they can be assigned to a different location. And then information regarding those plans is sent to another school if the student transfers to a different institution within a year. Then we have to send those reintegration plans and that information to the new school. The other piece of this is sometimes we also want to make sure that teachers are aware, depending on what the serious offense is, so that they know what they're looking for and they're not blindsided. It doesn't mean that there's just a blanket email that goes out. There's discretion about how that information is shared. This is our current practice, and it now aligns with state law. So 7055, conduct on school premises, just establishes requirements and expectations for visitors on school property. Basically says that during school hours, people need to check in at the office. They cannot disrupt what's happening in the school, and that even after school, if an individual is trying to utilize a facility, for example, that we have set up for an athletic team or extracurricular activity, that we can require them to leave, and if they refuse to do so, we can cite them with criminal trespass. They can't disrupt school operations, they can't disrupt lawful meetings, they can't bring on weapons unless they have a conceal and carry permit. They're law enforcement, someone who has those, that's part of those exceptions. And also interesting on line 220, that use of electronic devices, can't be videoing people to intimidate or bully or If you're doing that on school or district property, there can be consequences for that as well. And then line 237, that because it is a government facility, that you have to use the facility that is designated, sex designated facilities that match your birth certificate. We recommend adoption.
Was this the one that we were talking, I maybe mentioned putting in there something that students like K through 12 K through 8 can't be there by themselves?
This is not really the place to put that, so there's a different policy
Okay.
that governs that I put a note for policy committee to look at, and I believe it's policy 7060. So thank you. 3300 is gender inclusive schools. This is really talking about student records and how the official record of a student must reflect their legal name and gender on their birth certificate or changed by a court order. Unofficial records, this is on lines 119 through 126, can reflect the preferred name and gender but must have parent consent. And students must use, and I double checked this in the law, use sex designated facilities based on their birth certificate. So it's whatever is on their birth certificate. We don't make people like show us or any, like, I don't want people to think that. We just go by their birth certificate. So if somebody issues a complaint to us and says, we think this person's using the wrong restroom, we can investigate by looking at birth certificate. Oh, they're using the right restroom. We're done. Like, end of discussion. So, classes may be segregated by gender, like you may have a girls chorus. The student could sign up for the class that corresponds with their gender identity. So if they're a male and their gender identity is female, they could sign up for women's chorus. That's completely allowed. And then it also provides for some guidance with regard to student travel, that you work with parents and just kind of, you're not really, the thing that I want people to understand is parents just want to be involved in this process. They don't want to be left out of the decisions that are being made about their kids. Bullying is not allowed because of gender expression or identity, and UHSAA rules govern participation in athletics. So anything that's under the umbrella of UHSAA rules needs dominate. We recommend this policy be adopted. Questions? 3010.
Oh, I had one question.
Oh yes,
I'm
please,
sorry.
go ahead.
Okay, on line 52, when it says employee awareness training will be included within the procedure implementation, is that of this procedure of this policy? Or
It's
is
the
that
policy, yep.
Okay, so
Yep.
that's something we will be doing once
Yep.
we pass it. Okay,
Yep.
perfect.
Yep.
I think I had one more just clarifying question. On 130 and 131, it says, just the thing is talking about disclosing individual information about students, and it says we won't accept as expressly authorized by the superintendent following legal consultation. Is there like an example of what that would be? Let's see, a student's transgender status shall not be disclosed to individuals other than the student's parent without the student and parent's consent, except as expressly authorized by the superintendent following such legal consultation.
Yeah, I'm curious what
I'm
that
just
means.
kind of, I'm like, what would that be? What does that mean?
A certain teacher, maybe?
As the superintendent determines is appropriate.
Oh, okay. So what this is talking about is if a student is transgendered and the parent doesn't want anybody to know that their child is transgendered, then we don't disclose
Sure.
that. And so then all that's going to happen is if the parent has to consent to what that looks like. That's what I understood there.
Right, I
don't
don't get
know.
that part, but then it just says except.
Right.
That all happens what you just said,
I don't know.
except as authorized by the superintendent following.
I don't know. It sounds like we need to send this one back to policy committee before you
I'm
adopt.
sorry, I didn't catch that in policy.
I know, I don't know why I didn't read that either.
Okay, so we need to pull that one off of,
That's straight out of the model policy.
yes.
I guess I'm just curious
Yeah.
what an example would be. I don't know
I
if
have
we
no
need to
idea.
not do it, I'm trying to think why.
Right, the superintendent would get some kind of legal advice that says.
Well, like, would it be necessary for a coach or someone to need to know that?
Even if
Right.
the student.
I mean,
parent
that's
doesn't
the example I
consent.
could think of. I have no expertise in this, but.
No, the only reason that I remember that piece is because they talked about the arrangements for travel of a transgendered student has to be in consultation with the superintendent about what that looks like and what your solution is. But that's in lines 143 through 146.
Right, so
I
it
didn't
also
pay
needs to be
attention to
included
that part.
there.
So we need to pull that from business meeting.
We will make a motion at that time too.
Yeah.
Maybe
Great.
to
I just
wait.
got it
Okay.
now. I didn't read that.
Do you wanna wait on these others until business meeting?
Keep going,
Okay.
at least for a couple more.
3010 is school eligibility and admissions requirements. This is a new policy. This is a second reading. This establishes what enrollment and admissions looks like for students who are living within our district's boundaries but whose parents are not. Lines 37 to 41 establishes why a student may be identified as McKinney-Vento. So there's basically, the way I can summarize this is there's different layers that happen. So if a parent sends a student to go live in say with their grandma, let's just say that as an example, then they're not giving up legal guardianship of their student. They still want to be consulted on everything that's happening with their student. But that grandma needs to be able to have the ability to make decisions regarding that student. So they would sign a power of attorney that would allow the grandma to make some educational decisions, would be the emergency contact, could have access to the student's records. But all legal issues still tied to this child are still going to come through the parent. None of that changes as a result. Now, if a parent wants to transfer complete ownership of that guardianship, then they have to go through a transfer of legal guardianship, which requires a court order to do so. Okay, and that costs money. You have to go through the court system, and it takes like 60 to 90 days at minimum for that transfer to occur. When a person is either taking on the guardianship of someone through power of attorney or the guardianship of someone through legal guardianship, they are committing to paying for any of the fees associated with the child. So if the parent over here doesn't pay, I'm still saying yes, I'm willing to pay the fees and take care of this child and make sure they have food and clothing and all of those kinds of things. What's important is on lines 96. It is important to note that even with a power of attorney, a student may not be eligible to participate in UHSAA-sponsored athletics until legal guardianship is completed through the courts. So the student can participate in sub-varsity competitions until that legal guardianship is transferred to the resident of the district, but a durable power of attorney alone does not constitute a transfer of guardianship under UHSAA guidelines. Now, if the student has a power of attorney, but they're entering as a 9th grader and they have never established eligibility anywhere else, so they've never enrolled anywhere else, this is where this becomes important on line 106, then they can participate at every level. And recognize that it's where they enroll as a high school student. So if 9th grade is in the junior high, then it's where they enroll as a 10th grade student. If 9th grade is in the high school, it's where they enroll as a 9th grade student. So that's what that language is clarifying there. Now, what thwarts all of that is if there is no one that is willing to take on the financial obligation of the student, then we classify that student as a McKinney-Vento student. And they basically become a ward of the school district in that sense. And we're taking care of them and work with the state on that.
Can you explain to McKinney-Vento?
Yeah, McKinney-Vento means a student experiencing homelessness. So we would say that they don't, and there's many different ways. Homelessness doesn't necessarily mean that you are, that you don't have a parent with you, but this is an unaccompanied minor in this particular instance, and an unaccompanied minor would fall under the category of a McKinney-Vento student. Questions on policy 3010? Okay.
How about
Start the 1000s, because those are
this is
easy.
a good place to pause. And we'll talk about the rest. So, yes, go ahead, Melanie. Yeah,
Yes, please do.
I was gonna let you. Do you want to introduce our board member?
Okay, well, this is Bailey Lindstrom.
Hi, Bailey.
Hi, Bailey.
She just came from a soccer game, so that's why we're confused her
Yeah.
being late, so I hope you guys won.
We did, yeah.
Who did you play?
What?
Who did you play?
Uinta.
Great.
Great to have you as our student board member, Bailey. So, okay, we are now going to. I'm going to ask for adjournment, and then we'll start our business meeting close to 6 o'clock if we can. So, do you have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn.
Okay, motion made by board member Hall, we are adjourned, and we're going to move over to the PVC for
I gotta figure out how to do something.
No, I
No,
don't
no,
think
but
so.
Terry McCabe.
Is it nice to meet you?
Emily Harrison.
Shauna, nice
My
to meet
kids go to
you.
pro